Hello juniors, and welcome back to Computer Systems and Programming. For this video, we're going to be going over mathematical operators. So again, we talked at cohort about how to understand these as a concept. Right now, we're going to be talking about how to do them in the clips. So first thing you need to do is make a mathematical operators project folder. If you haven't already done so, you do File, New, PyDev project. Put mathematical operators in here, make sure you're, and then click finish. If you can't click finish, it's because your interpreter isn't configured correctly, and you can refer to older videos to figure out how to do that. I already have one, so I'm not going to create one. Then, once you have that, you can do File, New, PyDev module, and in this, you'll be making a module inside of the mathematical operators folder that is for practice math operators. So once you have that, you can click finish, make sure that it's in the source folder of mathematical operators, and then you'll see it pop up on the side and it'll pop up in your editor. So for this video, we're just going to be going through how to do math in Python. So we're just going to be using the mathematical operators that you already know about. So first, let's do it simple. Let's make an x variable and make it to 4 plus 4. So if we print x, the answer will print 8. Oops. Make sure whenever you go to run it, you're clicked on the module you want to run, then you click the drop-down arrow, run as Python run. So you'll see that x is printed to 8. That's how you do math. You just put the plus sign in between. You can add variables to numbers. So you can say y equals x plus 1. And then if I print y now, y, and I run this, and I'll print 8 and then 9. And then you can add variables to each other. So you can do z equals x plus y. And then I can print z, and z should equal x, which is 8, plus y, which is 9. So 8 plus 9 should equal 17. So, like I said, you can add data together, numbers together. You can have you can add a variable to a number, or you can add variables together. You can also increase variables by saying x equals x plus 1. So now what you're doing is you're overwriting x was originally set to 8, and then you're adding 1 to x and overwriting it. So now from here on out, x will equal 9. So that's just a cool thing that we'll be using later in loops to increase variables. You can also do this with strings. So you can do x, you can make string 1 equals, oops, I did not spell that right. String 1 equals something, something, and then string 2 equals else, and then I can make a string together that is string 1 plus string 2, and then if I print string together and run it, it'll print something else with no spaces because there's no spaces within here. If I wanted a space, I could add one here and then run it again, and then it'll print that space. When we add strings together, we call it concatenation instead of addition, but it's the same concept of adding it to the end, but we call it concatenating it to the end of that string. Next, there's subtraction. So it's the same thing. You can make a variable x equals 4 minus 4, and then if I print x, and run it, it prints 0 because that's what 4 minus 4 is. I can also do the same and make a new variable, or make it equal to a variable minus a number. So now it will print out. When I print it, print x, and I run this, it'll print out -1 because I decreased x by 1. You can also do variables minus variables. I'm not going to do it because it's pretty self-explanatory. You can also do multiplication. To do multiplication, you use the asterisk key. So you can do 2 times 2. And don't forget your equal sign. So now, if I were to print x, it would equal 4 because 2 times 2 equals 4. Again, you can do variable times a number, or number times a variable, or variables times variables. It all works the same when we're talking about integer and float variables. You cannot do addition, multiplication, subtraction. You cannot do any of these operators with booleans. It will give you values that you wouldn't quite understand, and you additionally can't do it with lists. So we're mostly focusing on integers, strings, and floats. Integers and floats are basically the same thing, so they treat it almost the same way. You can multiply them by each other, it doesn't matter. Strings are the only one that are a little different. You can't do subtraction with string because something minus else doesn't really make any sense. But you can do multiplication with strings. So you can make a string and you can make it like Michael times 4. And what it'll do is it'll make 4, if I print this, print string, it'll print Michael 4 times. And so now string equals Michael, 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 with no spaces. If I added a space here and then ran it again, it would add spaces in between all of those. So we've gone through a different addition, which you can use for integers, floats, or strings. Subtraction, which you can only use for integers or floats. And then multiplication, which you can use for integers, floats, or strings. The next thing we're going to go through is division. So you can do a number divided by another number. We just use the slash sign, and we can print that out, but we know basic division that x is going to equal 1 after 4 divided by 4. Note that this is regular division. It is 1 slash sign, so it's going to give us a decimal, because even if we don't have a decimal, it's going to give us one, so it'll always give us a float variable. If we want to get rid of that float variable, we can use the floor division. So now we can now when we print it, instead of being a float, it'll print as a integer, just 1. So remember, floor division, all it does is drop everything else behind it, so no decimals or anything. So even if we did an odd division, like 5 divided by 4, it's not going to print anything else but 1, because it's just it's going to drop that. Now if we printed 9 divided by 4, it's going to go up to 2, because 4 can go into 9 2 times. But there's a remainder of 1, but it doesn't keep that 1/4 on there. It gets rid of it. If you want to see that remainder, you can use the modulus, which is use the percent sign. So it's x equals 4, and then you can use percent sign 3. So now you're taking 4 divided by 3, and you're getting the remainder from it. Oh, let me print this real quick. Print x. So if I run this, the last thing is going to be 1, because 3 goes into 4 one time and then leaves 1 remainder. This is all based on long division, so if you ever want to find the answer to something, you can do long division on a piece of paper to understand it. Otherwise, just knowing that the modulus gives you the remainder, the two division signs give you a integer or a number without a decimal, and then the one division sign is regular division and gives you a decimal. The last thing we're going to talk about is exponential, which is exponents. So if I say x equals 2 to the fourth, so we use exponents by saying 2 asterisks or 2 multiplication signs, and I run that. Let me print it first. Run that, and I'll get 16 because that's what 2 to the fourth power is. So it's 2 to whatever power you put. Some people were confused that it's 2 to the second always, but it's not. It's just 2 to whatever number. So I can put 213 and it'll do that, and it'll give me this number. So you can put it to whatever power. I can also do it the opposite way. So I can put this, I can make 213 to the second power and run that, and it'll print this. So that's all of them. We went through addition, which you can do with integers, floats, or strings, but when we do it with strings, we call it concatenation. Then we went through subtraction, which only works with integers or floats. Then we went to multiplication, which can work with integers, floats, or strings, and the strings will just kind of concatenate themselves together. And we went through division, which you can only do with integers and floats. Then we went through floor division, which gives you an integer. You can do it with integers or floats, but it'll always return you an integer. It'll drop the decimal, basically, or drop the fraction, however you want to think about it. We have modulus, which is to give you the remainder, or to find the remainder. So it'll give you whatever is left over. And then exponential, which is just doing exponents or powers. So 2 to the whatever, 213 to the whatever. After you've watched this video and you've gone through all these, you understand this practice module, you can move on to your mathematical operator drills. You can download these off Canvas, and then all you have to do is read the instructions and then go down one by one and do what it says. So it says make a variable called math and assign it to, or set it to 4 plus 5 and print the variable math. And then you can check your work along the way by running it, but make sure when you go to a new module, you have to hit the drop down arrow, run as Python run. So it prints num first, and then it'll print math. So it prints 2 number 9s. Then once you complete all of these and it makes sense, you did the multiplication, division, modulo, floor division, exponential, you can move on to the debug mathematical operator drills. And then for this, you're going to be figuring out what the answer is. So you're going to be looking at the two variables, adding them together, or subtracting them, or multiplying, or whatever, and figuring out what the answer is. Feel free to use a calculator, but you can just type the answer right in this comment box, and then you won't have to run anything for this. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. I would suggest watching this video first, and then rewatching older videos if you're confused on submitting. Remember, the submitting process is you'll turn this mathematical operators project folder into a GitHub repository using the GitHub desktop app. So go in, make a local repository, create a repository in this folder. Then you'll push it to the online GitHub onto github.com, and then you'll submit the link. Make sure it's public. Submit the link to Canvas. There's very detailed steps in the activity prompt, so please go take a look at the activity prompt, and it'll tell you how to do each of these steps. But if all else fails, if the activity prompt fails and the video doesn't make sense, this video and the previous videos of how to submit things on GitHub, if none of those work, then you can email me and I will be happy to help you. All right, juniors, I will see you later.